Namaste. Amen, and blessed be. I did skip over our reading in interest of time, but I will mention it in a minute. If you read my article in this month's newsletter, you know that I was particularly inspired by a vigil. Strangely enough, it wasn't a vigil that I actually attended. It was just one that I heard about. It's actually the inspiration for today's sermon. The vigil that I'm referring to was held over a month ago to honor children. In particular, it focused on children caught in the tangle of U.S. immigration policy, the children of Gaza living under Israeli occupation and bombing, and the children across the United States who are impacted by gun violence. Now, the details of those three scenarios have shifted over the past month slightly. The problems persist. In some ways, they have actually gotten worse. All this month, we've been talking about the formation of character and soul. And this week, I've been thinking a lot about formation as it concerns children, both our children and children around the world. Often we think of caring for children and educating them as a basic act of kindness, and it is that. But this week I want to invite you to think more broadly about formation of young hearts and minds. If we take seriously the hopes and dreams of a better future, we must consider the development of children's character in our less than perfect world. Now, I don't typically turn to the Unitarian Universalist Association for official statements, but this week the president of the UUA, the Reverend Peter Morales, issued a really powerful statement about the events of Ferguson, Missouri. So I wanted to read this to you because I think it explains why the question of formation is so relevant. In his statement, Peter says, "The images from Ferguson, Missouri are profoundly unsettling. Tanks, tear gas, military weaponry for urban warfare, angry crowds. We immediately feel a mixture of shock, anger, dismay, helplessness, sympathy, and outrage. As religious people, we're committed to compassion and justice. What are we to do?" And he says, "In the short term, we must add our voices to those who seek to end the violence and chaos. We must stand in solidarity with those who seek justice. This is a time to be steady, calm, resolute, and determined. The real challenge for us is not the short term, but in the long term. Events like those transpiring in Ferguson have happened too often. The disturbing fact is that they could have happened in most American cities. There's so much bottled up frustration, so much injustice, so much repression, so much fear, hatred, and racism in our nation that the explosion of violence and rage in Ferguson is symptomatic of a cultural disease." He says, Ferguson is not about Ferguson. It's about the systematic dehumanization of people all over America. I found this statement by Reverend Morales so helpful because it identifies that immediate concern, the one that we see in the pictures in the newspaper, but it also invites us to take a step back. It invites us to see the events of Ferguson not just as a current moment, but as a manifestation of hundreds of years of injustice in our country. The uprising in Ferguson is a manifestation of deep psychological and social wounds that have to be identified and healed if we are ever to find peace. Now, whether it's in Ferguson, Missouri, or in Palestine, or here in Orange County, the questions of peace and justice that ravage our world are inseparable from this focus on formation that we've been talking about this month. I'm reminded of what a lot of people say is a Chinese proverb. I'm not sure where it actually comes from, but you've probably heard it. It says, if there's light in the soul, there will be beauty in the person. If there's beauty in the person, there will be harmony in the home. If there's harmony in the home, there will be honor in the nation. If there's honor in the nation, there will be peace in the world. And there's no knowing if this is actually grounded in traditional Chinese culture, but it could easily fit within Taoism or Chinese Buddhism. In fact, it could fit within a huge number of different religious traditions. So where it comes from isn't all that important. As Mahatma Gandhi taught us, or as Dr. King taught us, peace can't be seen as a distant goal. It's a method of getting toward that goal. What we do in formation isn't just about us. It's about a broader world at stake. It was nice to celebrate our teachers, and thank you, Liz and Dave, for your testimonials. That was great. And thank you again to all of our teachers. I didn't realize how many of you had volunteered to do this important work. The reading that we skipped over was called Give Us the Spirit of a Child, and it speaks of this sort of longing for the openness and innocence of childhood, so that we can not be afraid to need one another and not be afraid to accept the love and support from one another. It's a really wonderful reading. I think I've used it here before. It's about letting down some of our walls and embracing the world from a place of innocence. And it harkens back to a childhood that I think most of us experienced. But this week, the reading reminded me that the innocence that we so often associate with childhood isn't necessarily a given. Children around the world in different circumstances have profoundly different opportunities for formation than what we might have experienced. I had an amazing chance to see a little bit of a very different childhood in my short time in the Peace Corps in West Africa. Strangely enough, one of the things that I remember best about my time there was what I learned about childhood and parenting. And the basic lesson was that I saw many children thriving in what most of us would call poverty. Most of the kids there in the village attended school. They had enough food to eat, they had parents that loved them, and they had homes that were safe. They ran around sincerely happy and safe, with makeshift toys that would probably confuse our children here. One of the popular toys was using the rim of a bicycle wheel and sort of propelling it along with a stick. And I also remember one day coming back to my house, and there were kids right next to my house. In the dirt, they had carved a board to play a game called Mancala. Are you guys familiar with this game? It's a strategy game, sort of like checkers. But can you imagine our kids carving a board game in the dirt? I can't, it's difficult to imagine, but I'm willing to bet that they would do it under the right circumstances. The kids in the village didn't have scooters with flashing lights, they didn't have Barbie dream houses, but these kids ran around and they had fun. They were safe and they were thriving. Sadly enough, though, there were also a handful who weren't really thriving. They weren't being cared for. I mean, no one in the village was malnourished. It wasn't that sort of scenario. But some of the kids just weren't adequately supported. They were slipping through the cracks. And without public infrastructure to support them, these kids were pretty destined for a very hard life. They would survive, but it wasn't going to be easy. And yes, the same could very easily be said for kids here in the United States, some here in Orange County even. There in the village, the fine line between having enough and not having enough became very vivid. Those who had enough steady income for food and education were happy and healthy. Their life looked nothing like our own, but they were thriving children. There wasn't a whole lot of margin for misfortune, but they were making it. Now, hardship isn't a new thing for us as folks. I mean, people around the world and throughout history have faced hardship of one kind or another, some kinds of hardships that we can't even imagine. In researching, talking to those people who have faced different challenges, one of the things that emerges over and over again is that having a sense of purpose in life, something to do that next day, or having hope, made all the difference in the world. This is particularly true in conversations with Holocaust survivors. They said that having a reason to get up the next day made all the difference in the world. That hope may be anchored in a memory of the past or a vision for the future, but it made those challenges survivable. Hope and despair are strange bedfellows, I know, but they come up as a pair over and over again in religious teachings. So I want to talk now a little bit more about hope, because holding on to hope for those most in need in some ways becomes our responsibility. If we do it carefully, we can give hope a fighting chance by holding out a hope for the wider world. Now, this is important. I'm not talking about holding on to our own hope. I'm not talking about a hope that those people in loss and despair will someday live out our dreams. I'm not talking about supporting a hopeful vision. I am talking about supporting a vision that's relevant to their lives and their context. In the Peace Corps, I learned to hold a hope for my village that wasn't about global manufacturing or entering the international financial market and a thriving Africa. It's much simpler than that. I learned to hold a hope for families having enough to eat, safe homes to raise their children, and enough stability in their government to go about their personal business in peace. That's it. As people of relative privilege, it's our responsibility to help other communities hold on to their vision of hope, a genuine and achievable hope. We can celebrate the small successes with them. Success doesn't mean having $1 million home or a Mercedes. Success looks like a whole variety of different things, and in particular, it looks like children thriving and children having enough. It's something that happens all over the world that we can celebrate. And let's remember that plenty of communities here in our own country are needing our help to hold on to hope. On Sunday, September 21st, after our worship service here, we're showing a film called The Dream Is Now. It's a short film about dreamers, immigrants to the United States who came here as children without documentation but have learned to thrive, many of them have gone to college, but now as adults they're caught in a legal web. After the film, we'll have a chance to talk with some other undocumented immigrants and some other experts. And my hope is that we can come and hear about their dream It's a chance for us to learn to help support them in holding on to a realistic dream. Because we can hold a vision for immigrant families and for the economic well-being of our community. It's not a hope that the borders are going to crumble down and that immigrants are going to be buying million-dollar homes, or that everyone will look and act American, whatever that means, or that we're all going to be singing Kumbaya over the border. We hold out a much more reasonable hope that one day immigrants can gain a fair and reasonable pathway to citizenship, that they can find work legally so that their efforts contribute to our full shared economy. It's not a wild dream, it's actually a very achievable one. So I hope that you'll find a few extra minutes in your schedule to stick around for that film on September 21st, because I truly believe deep down that hearing another person's hopes and dreams and helping them to hang on to them is one of the most important things that we can do in this world. Now, over the past couple of weeks, in Ferguson, Missouri, we've heard and seen a different kind of challenge, a different kind of pain and devastation. The pain of racism being expressed there is the history of our country. I know we don't like to hear that, it makes us squirm, but it is our shared history. The compromise that enabled the signing of our beloved Constitution was based on the oppression of Black Americans. Since that time until today, Black people have been systematically oppressed by our government and misrepresented in the media. And the residents of Ferguson, Missouri have every right to be outraged. And they're outraged not because of the single killing of a single Black man by a white police officer. They're outraged that it was just another day in America. But this is also a question of hope and dreams, I think, and getting our hopes and dreams mixed up. A lot of us have been so busy hoping and dreaming that a Black child can grow up and become Barack Obama or Oprah Winfrey that we've forgotten that many Black people are simply hoping and dreaming that their child won't be shot or imprisoned. As people of privilege, it's our responsibility to hold a vision of hope for young people. Hope that has been stolen from them. As I've been thinking about formation this month, I couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to grow up as a young Black man. I have my own experience of the world as a gay man and the assumptions that get placed on that, but I wonder, what would it be like to grow up, to have your formation occur as a Black man in America? What must it be like to be perpetually suspect? What must it be like to know that you have a 1 in 5 chance of landing in prison? What must it be like to know that people that know nothing about you, when they see you, are afraid of you? Or to know that when people like you are shot by police because of that fear, not a whole lot seems to happen. It's our responsibility to hold a vision of hope for young people who have had it stolen from them. That may sound like a daunting and even impossible task. We don't have the power to change the world, but each of those questions that I raised about growing up as a young Black man were about messages that are delivered from the outside. They're messages that are delivered bit by bit, year after year, sometimes in direct ways, but mostly in indirect ways. For better or worse, people learn about their value in society through interacting with others. They pick up on clues. Through our words and our body language, we tell other people how we feel about them and what their role is. I want to suggest that we can hope and dream with people of color, hope and dream not of being a president or of being a media mogul. We can hope and dream with them of a world where people are simply treated as human beings, treated equally. I want to suggest that the best way for us to hold that hope, to keep it alive, is by demonstrating it. By treating people that we interact with dignity and respect. It sounds so small, but it's so big. On November 22nd, and I know that's a long ways off, but in the midst of this sermon, I couldn't help but talk about it. On November 22nd, we're hosting a workshop on navigating cultural differences. It's a workshop to help us encounter people who are different from us with respect and genuine curiosity. I hope that everyone can find the time to attend. Who can't learn more about treating other people with dignity and respect? Now, our ability to demonstrate respect is a really powerful thing. It's about far more than being nice, and it's not just about a single encounter with a person. Like Cheryl was telling us, when we demonstrate respect and compassion for other people, we demonstrate that our mutual dream is possible. We hold out a realistic hope for a kind of world that we want to live in. Now, this has been a difficult sermon, confronting some difficult realities of human struggle. And though we're called to bear witness to the struggle, we are also called to keep our eyes on a vision of a better world. I've said this twice, and I'll say it one more time. As people of privilege, it's our responsibility to hold a vision of hope for young people who have had it stolen from them. I want to close today's sermon with the last paragraph of Reverend Peter Morales' message that I was reading earlier, his message on the events of Ferguson, Missouri. As Unitarian Universalists, we have faith that it need not be like this. We can create a world that is accepting, fair, loving, and diverse. In the short term, let us stand on the side of love with those seeking healing and some measure of justice. In the long term, let us rededicate ourselves to the work of building a world where events like those in Ferguson are unthinkable. Amen.